Good day, everyone, and Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of Global CIO Forum, Microland, and Securonics, I welcome all the online attendees to this live virtual summit titled Beyond Ransomware, Best Practices for Smart Security Operations and How to Build a Cyber Resilient Future. Taking part in this live virtual summit are Augusto Barros, VP Solutions Marketing at Securonics, Bala Ramanan, AVP Risk and Compliance at Microland, Ravi Saxena, Head of Customer Success, Middle East at Microland, and Vasudev Surabhi, Director of Cyber Security at Microland. So before I hand over to Ravi to begin this live virtual summit, here are some short housekeeping rules. All attendees are on mute throughout the session. However, we encourage attendees to ask questions through the chat option, and the speakers shall answer them at the end of the session. There will also be 3 polls across the 60 minutes live event, and we encourage all attendees to participate, thereby giving us an average representation of our attendees. So now I'd like to invite Ravi to take over and begin his session.
Thank you, Arun. Thank you for the introduction. So a very warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for taking out time for this session. And as an appreciation for your time, we would like to share a coffee voucher, a Starbucks coffee voucher with all the attendees. And now a quick glance about Microland. So Microland is a digital transformation pioneer who have been supporting organizations for last 32 years. We transform, we secure, and we manage all aspects of IT that enables digital for global enterprise, from cloud to data center, from device to IoT, from network that connects them all. So plus on top of that, we have built a very strong partner ecosystem, and we have a global footprint. We operate in all 6 continents. And next, I would like to talk about the past year's development, which will form the basis for this panel discussion. So if you have seen in last 1.5 years, Middle East witnessed a significant increase in adoption of advanced technologies. And this rapid digitalization has triggered a high number of interconnected devices. And because of this, the region is facing a cyber pandemic along with COVID-19. Though governments have, created or established cybersecurity councils, which have developed various policies and laws to strengthen cybersecurity, but organizations must respond proactively to these cyber threats that we have witnessed, or we have seen a lot of spike during such attacks, in the last 1.5 years. And what we feel the 2 major challenges that any organization is facing is effective threat hunting, and second is the ransomware attack. So with these 2 challenges in mind, I would like to hand it over back to Arun to initiate the panel discussion. Over to you, Arun. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ravi. So with that, I would move to the first poll of the session, and I invite all the attendees to participate in this first poll. As you can see, the poll is now popped up, and it would be great if all of you could participate so we can get an accurate representation of where you stand in terms of these attributes. We will wait for the polling to be finished before we start on the panel. Thank you for the poll. We have some results over here, but before we deliberate, let me invite the panel to come on board. So can I invite Augusto Barros from Securonics, Bala Ramanan from Microland, and Vasudev Surabhi from Microland to join us. So the results of the poll have popped up there. I wonder if you can see it says 100%. Any comments on that? Augusto, Bala, Vasu, anything we want to say, or should we just look at it a little later?
Sorry, we are not able to see the
Okay,
results.
so I see the result says 100%. We are currently working on it and need, so they popped up here again on the screen.
Yeah. So I'll take a go at it, and I think this reflects the exact situation what me, Augusto, and Vasu were discussing. The theme behind this ransomware, this topic, and I think we are bang on this particular aspect. Over to you, Vasu. Any comments?
I mean, this exactly reflects the current reality of the market and customer challenges. We will definitely develop and share our viewpoints, I think, during the panel. Augusto, over to you.
And I believe it also shows one kind of key characteristic of security that kind of you're ever trying to improve and catch up, right? So I think that's kind of expected. Everyone is saying kind of we are working on it, essentially because we are always trying to improve and get kind of and catch up to the threats. So I think that's a natural response. So I think the result is expected.
Yeah.
Great. I think Augusto, just as you said, enterprises are in a catch-up game rather than proactive game. I think this is a key theme which is going to come out in the panel. So once again, would like to for the attendees, this panel is going to focus on beyond ransomware, and to make it easy for all of you to understand, we're breaking it up into two parts, and we're going to approach it in two clear sections. The first one we'll start with the security threat landscape and its challenges, and essentially. As we have seen, there's a continuous growing intensity and volume of threats. And for a person who's not in the industry, it almost looks like as if every enterprise is literally can be breached, and they have absolutely no defenses. I mean, that's what it looks like because the media keeps coming up with announcements. In fact, Gartner research estimates that 90% of the ransomware attacks are preventable, and yet organizations succumb to this. So I think it'll be very interesting now to understand the security threat landscape, see what are the possible approaches to handling these threats. Also look at some questions of whether threat actor techniques are changing or are they the same. Are these applications, using machine learning also getting compromised? So let's start with the first question to you, Vasu. Can you share some insights on the latest evolving nature of ransomware? Where is it heading? What is the current trajectory? Any insights over that? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think before we kind of look at it from a future standpoint, I think it's important to understand actually what are we dealing with, right? So the basics of the ransomware, the construct of ransomware, it is essentially malware, right? The underlying factor, it's a malware that is designed to encrypt, as soon as it's dropped into victim machine. What is different that we've seen with ransomware attacks is actually very much on the face. Like unlike other attacks, they're trying to evade, they're trying to hide into the different process. Ransomware is very much onto victim machines, and they're very clear in their intent and what they want to achieve. Right. The second factor which is important in the ransomware today, what we're seeing across the board in different regions is it's also about attackers. The framework and the mindset is not about just attacking one particular endpoint. It's also going beyond that and trying to take the entire organization under the control, right? So that the severity and the scale of those attacks are actually changing as we're seeing more and more criminal gangs, nation staters, actors using these methods to exploit their targeted victims, right? From our lens, as a service provider, we've been serving the market and clients across the board. I think we will continue to see, attackers using different campaigns to launch and exploit our victims, right? Even in the Middle East, if you take an examples of Aramco attack, you've seen they're targeting energy industry, you've seen they're targeting financial industries. Some of these small, hospital chains like Morphill's also been breached, right? So this method and notions of attackers using could change, because there is also notion of using different tools, right? Even the attacker does not have the expertise. He can actually buy tools from criminal market and then launch it, right? So what we are witnessing is two themes that I would call it as more or less democratization of these cyber attacks and the criminal gangs using these tools. The third is, I think, what we're also saying, right, like Ravi pointed out about the industrialization of the cybercrime in the Middle East. That's really a big concern. I think what we predict from future, ransomware is kind of encryption. You will see a different variants that will come out, right? You will see ransomware who's going to do poisoning, but because it's too much, from a business lens, from attacker, is too much good money. We don't see these type of threat attacks going away soon, right? So there's no way, we'll have shutdown of these attacks. We have to brace more and more different forms of such attacks.
Interesting. So the trajectory is going to be that enterprises need to prepare for a continuous onslaught of attacks, and also that they're going to become more diverse based on how the businesses change. They're going to be following how the businesses change. So it's like a continuous, heads up type of a.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And also, I think one point I want to add, in the past when they used to extract ransomware, it's a very difficult process, buying vouchers. Now, with the lights of technology and cryptocurrency, it's much easier for them to really extract the money. So, and with that two notions, it's too good money and it's too good to extract the money. So, we have a good business out here, right?
Great, fantastic, interesting. I'd like to move to you, Augusto. Now, we have seen continuously across the pandemic, we had solar winds, and then we had water utilities, and these high-profile attacks have just started going up and up into the pandemic. And just wondering that with all these high-profile attacks targeting critical national infrastructure, government establishments, from your point of view, sitting in Securonics as a solution provider, what are the makings of today's high-impact attack? Has the formula changed? Is there a new approach, a new modus operandi? Go ahead.
Right. I'll say that the formula is kind of for the different attacks that we see, they change, but they change slightly. Right? For example, when you talk about solar winds, I believe that the manner where the attackers kind of managed to get into the organizations was slightly different, right? And it was a supply chain case. But what happens with the modern attacks is that they're multi-staged, right? And we know kind of many of these stages, right? We know that the attackers will have to do extensive lateral movement. They're gonna get in the environment, but they won't get into their final target most of the times. Right? So they need to move laterally in the network, so they will be able to get to the places where they want to, right, where they will finally achieve their objectives. It can be just a simple ransomware case, right, where they want to cause disruption by getting to the places where when those services will be stopped, right, it will cause the maximum say disruption for the target, right, as an organization. They may be looking for certain data, right, that they want to extract, so they need to go to those databases or those file repositories, so they need a lot of lateral movement. They also need to escalate privileges. They normally will get to the environment, but not with the level of privileges that they need, again, to achieve their objectives. So they will have to go through a series of activities to escalate their privileges. They may need to compromise new accounts. They may need to add privileges to the accounts that they already have. And so they need to do things to get kind of higher privileges. And on that process, kind of, especially kind of when you look at something that is trying to cause disruption, like ransomware or sabotage, right? Cyber terrorism, they also have to touch on a very high number of assets. So if you want to stop an organization, you're going to have to stop a lot of servers, right? It's not kind of only going to one or two systems and disrupting those. You need to touch a lot of assets, right? So I think kind of the formula of the attack, kind of we know quite well, right? Kind of there is extensive lateral movement, kind of privilege escalation, and kind of touching a lot of assets in your environment. Now, the bad news is we keep seeing this happening, right? Now, there is a piece of good news. The good news is that all these activities will generate a lot of signals in your environment, right? So when they move laterally, we can see that activity from a network point of view, but you can see that activity in logs. When they escalate privileges, you also can see a lot of that type of activity in the logs as well. And when they start touching systems, it's also going to generate a lot of signals from logs, from EDR, from network telemetry. So we have a lot of data that we can use to detect this type of activities. And the good thing is we also have the tools. We can say we, as an industry, we have the tools available to ingest those signals, process them, and find that malicious activity. So I think the good news is the bad guys have to do a lot of things in your environment to achieve their objectives, and though that activity will generate signals, and we are prepared to ingest those signals and identify that that's kind of malicious activity going on.
Very interesting, which brings me to the next question. I mean, what you're saying is that a lot of activity is taking place, and somewhere along the line, the noise should be, can be monitored, can be detected. But today, enterprises have a large variety of challenges, and the CISO, yes, the CISO and the CISO department should be monitoring that. But if I just look at some of the challenges that enterprises are facing today, for example, digital transformation. I mean, businesses continuously, relentlessly putting pressure on them to become agile, reduce their time to market. Then you have the limited amount of capability of a SOC center, a big investment, but maybe not ready for some of the latest threats. You also have the shortage of cybersecurity skills, which are all the time over there. So it's a good news, yes, as you said, that okay, lateral movement, multi-stage creates noise. We have a window for detection. But here's the question now: is every attack a new innovation that literally needs to be, looked at from a new point of view? Because as you rightly mentioned about democratization and industrialization of cybercrime, these people are always going to be ahead. Go ahead, Augusto. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of when we observe the threat agents, I won't say that some of them are lazy, right? So they will not reinvent all the methods of their attacks every time, right? There are things that they have been using for years, and they are pretty, say, effective, right? So trying to, for example, test default passwords, right, for certain accounts that exist in certain environments. That's something that we see threat actors doing for what, 30, 40 years maybe, right? Since I think the security concerns started, right? And they were going to keep doing it because those types of activity, that type of activity is effective, right? So say, are they reinventing the attacks or creating everything from scratch? No, they're not, right? Many of these steps are things that we know quite well, how they do it, how they are performed. There will be pieces of the attacks that will be brand new. I won't say that supply chain attacks, and like the SolarWinds case, going back to that one again, was completely new, but I'd say it was unexpected, right? Such an important piece of software being compromised in a way that could compromise thousands of organizations at once, right? With a single move, I think was something that was in a certain way unexpected and probably a new method. But if you look at the entire attack, right? Why were they detected in the first place, right? How far I managed to find them? Because they were doing a few things that were already known, and they knew how to detect them, right? So that's one thing that is very important to notice is it's very hard for an attacker to gather new methods and new techniques, right? New TTPs for the entire attack chain. So they're gonna reuse things. If it's not a malware sample, they're gonna reuse the technique. The command and control technique, for example, that the malware uses to communicate with the outside world, right? They're going to reuse the method. They may not use the server, right? The domain name that they use in another attack, but the method will be the same. So that really helps us from a defender point of view to detect that type of activity.
Interesting point, but just to complete that, why do defense mechanisms fail? I mean, we heard a lot about the perimeter not being the place to invest today and needs to change. But other than that, why do defense mechanisms fail, in your opinion?
I think it's two key reasons, right? I think one is a strong focus on individual indicators, right? So it's the old signature or rule-based approach where you keep searching only for certain artifacts, like the hashes of malware, right? Or IP addresses or domain names that have been used in previous attacks. And the attackers kind of have known that for a long time. So what they do is that for each attack, they just refresh all those artifacts, right? They're going to use a different infrastructure for command and control. They're going to rebuild the malware so there is a different hash, right? They're going to just refresh that so the indicator-based defense, right? The indicator-based detection will not work. I think that's kind of one of the key things. So we need to have the detection that is smarter in a way that you're searching or you're trying to detect the technique and not the artifacts. And the other piece is, and it's something that happens with many organizations and it's very hard to handle, is the coverage of your environment, right? So organizations keep expanding and changing their technology landscape, and it's very hard for them to keep monitoring everything. Not only because things are changing very fast, but also because the volume of data is very high, right? They need something that is very adaptable and scalable to ingest kind of data from their new cloud services, their new networks, right, the new devices that exist in their environment. And because this landscape is always changing and expanding, you end up with blind spots, right? And as soon as you have blind spots, you may miss activity and miss an attack.
Very interesting. I mean, typically the CISO's nightmare is digital transformation, because the attack vector and the attack surface is expanding so fast that they really get worried about these things. But Vasu, I just want to jump to an interesting part which Augusto just mentioned, that threat actors are not necessarily innovating end to end. They may look at some parts and refresh and interchange. But sitting in the US with the FBI, the CIA, and all these departments monitoring global threat actors and also beefing up government establishments, the national threat actors, the one thing they're looking at is a completely new approach. Do you think there is actually large-scale innovation happening to come up with a completely new approach where it's big ticket items? Your thoughts on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think from our lens, including, if you follow the US guidelines and recent FBI approaches to ransomware, I would like to, in a second, I guess, thought process here. What we see is, if I put as some statistics number, right, 70% of attacks that we notice across the board, they are known signature, right? They are known forms of techniques and procedure, right? They would have certain variations, but these variations, you could, if you have a good hygiene, you could actually have mechanism to detect it. But the other, threats in the market and across the board is, again, very targeted, very focused criminal gangs going after an organization, which is really, really planned, right? That's where it's sometimes it's very difficult to plan for such attacks, but you can always take a proactive step to make sure that you're going to make them costly to attack you, right? So that's another way. What is interesting in the overall FBI approach, I mean, this applies to across all regions, right? I think there is a government guidelines in strictly restricting not to go with ransomware payments and actually make them really focused upon cyber hygiene. I think that's where the guidance is coming from, US regulations and across the board, as a private or even public sector companies.
Great. Thanks for those insights, Vasu. Now, again, moving forward a little bit more, if I can take the question up with you, Vasudev, that the CISO and their teams, especially the zero-day attacks and some of these, like the really sophisticated Hafnium threat actor and others who are really state of the art in terms of innovation. What exactly should they do? How do they actually approach these new types of threats? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good question. So I'll address this in two parts. One part, I think the first key theme and important aspect is, criminal gangs, they don't really differentiate as a large enterprise or a small enterprise. They will exploit anything that is vulnerable, any system that is being connected. If they have tools and intent, which is, if it is vulnerable, they will definitely exploit it. The whole notion, I think the previous notion of, yes, nobody interested in me, little old me, that mindset has to change. So, I think in a way, if you're leaving your cybersecurity program and resilient to hope, you will no longer be sustainable in your business model. I think that's fundamentally, I think the mindset from CISO lens has to be a different thought process, what we are, dealing with today. The second aspect of is, If you take some of the well-known attacks, like for example, WannaCry, even if I go beyond that, right? So if you take this problem, the underlying problem is beyond ransomware, right? Ransomware is a form of malware that I underlined earlier. You would continue to see many different types of malwares, right? There could be malware which will do data poisoning. There is ransomware is doing encryption, and there will be different forms of it. So you have to look at the lens from a different holistic perspective. That is an important aspect. And coming back to the WannaCry situation, Microsoft released a patch about 2 months ago before actually the WannaCry situation happened, right? So it comes to the the hygieneness of how good is your vulnerability program. Not only you have mechanism tools, but can you actually put in a process, say that, hey, these are my application servers, these are my servers which has zero-day attacks, which is connected to a public internet, right? So it's more of a process, tools, and overall hygiene that you need to look at. I think that's where the biggest challenge, what CISOs are missing. You cannot build just a defense layer for ransomware and think that you will be secure, because you need to look at it as an overall program approach to your cybersecurity.
Great, interesting over there. Augusto, one quick take from you about the zero-day attacks. Do you think threat actors, global threat actors, are investing significantly in this area to be ahead of even the vendors themselves? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, some threat actors will be doing that, right? Kind of those that have the resources to do it will. So if you think about kind of nation state agents, right? Kind of intelligence agencies, they are stockpiling on 0 days. Kind of we've seen a lot of evidence that kind of really corroborates that fact. And there is also probably the dark market where some researchers are developing these 0 days and selling them for crime gangs as well, right? So I say nation states, probably the more higher profile type of crime groups also have a few 0 days. Now, one thing that I will go back is the 0 day is one step, right, of a multi-staged attack, right? So will they happen? Well, depending on your how the profile of your organization, you're more or less likely to be a victim of a 0 day scenario. But that's the first stage, right? For them to get in, for them to accomplish their objectives, they will have to do many of the other things that, again, will not be entirely new. So I think the silver lining here is, yes, one of the steps may be new, but not all the steps will be new. So we still have some, some room to maneuver from a defense perspective.
Very interesting. And as you said, they still need to move laterally. They still need to move up the administrative privileges. So all those things generating noise and obviously activity alert. So at this stage, I'd just like Vasu, Augusto, and we on hold. I'm going to request the second poll over here. And essentially, once again, would like to request all the attendees to participate in this poll. So that we get a good feel of representative feel of your position on cybersecurity. Go ahead, please, attendees. Okay, so can we have the results on the screen? So can you see the results, Augusto and Vasu?
Yes. Yeah, we can see.
Yes, we can see it.
So as you can see, we screwed on two of them with 50%, 50%. So we're going to remove this result and go back to the video. Thank you for showing that over there. And Bala, I'd like you to join us again with the video with the webcam on. Thanks, Bala. Any take on those results which just came from the second poll? 50%. I don't have. I'll just read it out. 50%. I don't have visibility of my assets, so this is not at all. And 50%. I don't have an effective monitoring and correlation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'll cover the first part on the visibility part. I think Augusto can chime in on the correlation aspects of it. And I think in a way, it's saying the current problem that customers are facing, right? So always when the hygiene factor, when we look at cybersecurity as a program, you need to make sure cybersecurity 101 calls visibility and monitoring of all your key assets, right? That across the span, be it on-premise system, network systems, to endpoints, to your entire cloud assets. I think that is important in terms of having a good cybersecurity monitoring from operational standpoint. From correlation, I think Augusto can chime in and add his pointers. I think it's also equally important. Not only you're just having the assets, but actually you're able to look at the noise, which makes more sense. So I'll lead to Augusto to add in his pointers.
Right, and I think that the answer again kind of is not surprising, right? I mentioned kind of, as you said, kind of the visibility part, right? But on the correlation side, I believe kind of what is also happening is that many organizations are still relying on tools that I'll say is the older generation of SIM-like tools, where you get all those signals that I mentioned, right, that are available, but those old kind of tools are designed to aggregate things and to consolidate on a single point. But the signals, kind of the amount of signals have grown so much, right, that kind of now we have too many things, even when you're trying to do simple correlation among them. Right? So now you need something that will need to go beyond that in a way that it can prioritize, right, the signals that are most important and put an additional level of intelligence, of analytics on top of that. Right? So that's kind of where the ML techniques will come in, the dynamic risk scores that will also prioritize things where you're still receiving a huge amount of signals, but now the tools are smarter in a way that you give you a smaller set of things that you need to pay attention to, and also with an additional context layer, right? It will give you, right, kind of some things that look suspicious, but it will also give you additional context where you can make sense of it faster as well. Right? So I think that's kind of one thing that kind of we've been doing, and I think it's probably kind of one of the core of kind of the Securonics strengths, right? Kind of it's adding that additional level of analytics that will further reduce, right, what we're going to have to present to the analysts, and also present in a smarter manner, so they will be able to reach a conclusion about that situation faster.
Interesting over there. Bala, any comments over there? Now, when I see the first one, I don't have visibility of my assets. We do a lot of, we get a lot of vendor solutions for asset management. Now, asset management and security of assets are way apart, but increasingly the industrial side of operations getting threatened by the nation state actors who can really make a difference if they target those high value assets, and something like this, that I don't have visibility of my assets. Is that a good practice? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm again reiterating this fact, Arun, because when we were deliberating this topic for this session, we wanted some takeaways for the audience where we could actually talk about the challenges what the today the CISO community is facing in the market, and that's precisely what we had tabled up. And I'm not so glad to see the responses, but yes, that's the current state of situation. Visibility becomes a more key aspect of your start of your cybersecurity journey, and it is not wise enough to depend only on a technology to solve your problem, because there are a lot of things which needs to be done there. So I think we will be discussing more on this definitely, and I think the questions what we are reflecting here, the responses from the audience are only re-ensuring that what we are doing for our customers and guiding them are still on the right track.
Thanks, Bala. We'll come back to you. Let me just ask another question from to Vasu on. So we're moving now away from the security threat landscape to something which is equally important, which is the best practices to secure enterprises. And these best practices can range from can scale across a large number of activities, whether it's improving enterprise risk, whether it's looking at the next generation SOC operations, which is including remediation, whether it is security by design, whether you look at the cloud architecture, and whether you look at the long baseline of behavior analytics. So I guess the list of such possible best practices is quite long. But let's come to you, Vasu. This long baseline of cyber incidents, which has been going on, like Augusto said, for years, what does this actually consolidate? Are there certain best practices that will never go away? Is there Is it getting more and more clear what best practices a cybersecurity specialist should follow? Go ahead, Vasu.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. I think this is a difficult one, right? So, so let me give our experience and what is the approach I think you should take from your CISO lens and your cyber program. I think the topic, I think what we, like Bala said, as we are ideating, we wanted to have the notion of resilience because resiliency is all about having a holistic view, a programmatic view of your cybersecurity for your organization, right? There, we're not going to go to the definition of resiliency, but as a key takeaway from our lenses, there are two key attributes of resiliency part. One is you want to make sure it is very difficult for attackers to take you down. That's one notion that you always need to keep in mind. The second notion is you want to make sure that you're able to bounce back quickly to the business, even in the face of cyber attack, right? So the two attributes of resiliency, if you keep in mind, and when you design that program, that is all about really making sure that you're able to be on top of the game in light of what you were seeing in the marketplace. So if I have to call out maybe particularly 3 best practices that is actually will help in the foundation of your programs. The first thing I think I did call out in my previous response is all about having the mindset. So the mindset is all about, you're going to assume that you're going to see some sort of compromise in your system, and you build layers of and your security around it, right? How do you make sure that you're able to defend against these attacks? A good way to start is, look at from your cyber program from a risk line, and look at from cyber program assessment from maturity sides. That's a good way to start for you to identify where you are in the maturity scales and what you need to look at, from your gap standpoint. The second aspect I would call it's a technology aspect, right? So many of our customers, they have so many tools. It's just not about having many tools, it's having the right tools, and do you have a right technology security foundation, right? So one example that I even like to call out, but I was to mention, having a proper next-gen SOC monitoring solution that has really good analytics, a data lake platform, looking at your entire assets, that is important, right? Not just that, if you look at the pattern, there are a huge amount of volume target attack toward endpoint. Right? How good is your endpoint security program that is integrated to your SOC? So in a way, you need to really look at from your technology foundation layer that is supporting your security operations. The third thing is, again, a different hygiene I would call out. It's an operation hygiene. Over the years, in lights of digital transformation, we are, tasked to build, IT organization tasked to build applications and various other systems that are no longer, fundamentally design and principle of security mindset, right? So we have some sort of, I think I would say process in depth from a security lens that we need to revise and reshape it. That's also involves not just looking at your process and systems, also look at what sort of skills within your organization has to support these modern technologies and be ahead of the advanced attacks and stay on top of the game, even in terms of the breach, right? So two metrics that you can call out is how costly it will be an attacker to target you, right? That's one thing. It's an important metrics you can look at. The other one is the MTTD is about what is your mean time to really detect and bounce back. So if you keep that 3 foundation principles and these metrics, I think that is a really good to from the best practical lens. And I also would like to submit, these are not while I call it out easily, but these are not really easy to implement. It's really requires step-by-step process of forward implementation, process hygiene, operation hygiene. So I'll call it that.
Yeah, agreed. Very interesting. How you put it, the 2 things I really liked was how costly and mean time to detect. Yeah, but of course, as you said, easy to enumerate, not so easy to implement. Yeah. Which brings us to an interesting thing, Augusto. So you have in the past engaged, interviewed, talked a lot with end users in your previous professional experience. So you've had a first-hand feel of the types of challenges CISOs face, whether it's budgets, whether it is the business peers, whether it is policies. What are the typical challenges that they have in, let's say, using these two metrics or building these two metrics into their day-to-day operations, which Vasu just mentioned. Go ahead, please, Augusto.
Right. I think that we see challenges kind of across the three major, say, kind of dimensions, right? Kind of your security operations, like people, process, and technology. Right? And I've always used kind of while working kind of with at Gartner, right? Kind of I used a lot of kind of what they call the cybersecurity triangles to talk about those topics, right? And kind of I think kind of when it's about coverage, something that we were always kind of talking about was the coverage kind of from a point of view of network, endpoint, and logs, right? Kind of for you to have kind of ideal visibility, kind of you need kind of some visibility from those three vectors, right? Many organizations, because EDR tools have been very effective in threat detection, have kind of relying too much on endpoints, right? But then kind of what happens is that they will have some non-managed device in their network, so the EDR agent is not there, or they will have a threat scenario that happens entirely on the cloud applications or cloud environments that they use, so there's no EDR agent there as well. So they start having these blind spots when they rely too much in one of those vectors, right? In this case, the endpoint. So what we would tell them is, well, you have to have a balanced approach from a visibility standpoint, so you can see what's going on the endpoint, what's going on the network, what's going on the logs. From a people point of view, right? And we all also have seen too many organizations trying to build kind of a security operations practice without the right resources, right, or the appropriate number of resources. So I will get kind of many calls on people saying, well, I have these 3 guys here and we are building a SOC. You cannot build a SOC with 3 people, right? Kind of well, you may try, but you're gonna have huge gaps in coverage, either kind of from a time perspective, or from a threat perspective, because just kind of thinking from a 24/7 operation, right? You need at least 10 people. And that's minimum, right? Depending on where you are in the world, there will be regulatory requirements from a labor perspective that you can push that to 15, sometimes 20 people, just so you can cover that 24/7, 365 days a year, right? So kind of there are kind of big challenges from a resourcing point of view, right? It's not only the number of resources, you need them properly skilled as well. And there are organizations that have the headcount, right, or have the budget for that headcount, but they cannot hire, right? Because it's extremely hard to find people to do it. Right? So I think kind of the answer to that is for you to rely again on another triangle where you have your internal team. It's going to exist anyway. It can be very small, it can be kind of big, but you're going to have a few internal resources, at least kind of to coordinate incident response, for example. But you need an internal team. You need a service provider, right? An MSSP, most organizations will have some of their kind of work with a service provider. And the vendor, right, of the technologies that you have in your environment also have their own team that will be doing some work for you. Even if you do not see it, they will be developing content, for example, right, and for your threat detection tools. So you see all the threat research that Securonics performs, right, to build on our out-of-the-box content. That's something that we are doing on behalf of our clients. Right, and so that's going to say that the triangle of people that you need to have in place in order to be properly staffed for security operations. And then there is the technology aspect as well, where there is another triangle. You need technology that has good architecture, good analytics, and good content. And when I say architecture, is the technology is capable to handle kind of the data volume, the data velocity, the data variety, that people call it the 3 V's of the cloud, right? So a technology that is capable of handling that huge amount of data at high speed that you have to ingest in order to find those threats, right? You need to scale quickly, it has to have kind of elasticity, it has to have performance, and you can only achieve those things with the right architecture. Right? Some solutions you can throw harder on it and try to scale, right? But there will be a limit there. If it's not a limit kind of from, you kind of go beyond that kind of as a fact, you're going to have a budget limit to do it. So you need an architecture that will allow you to scale in a cost-effective manner. Then you have the analytics piece, right? Kind of where you're going to get a lot of signals. If you try to identify those threats, as we said before, with just rules and signatures, you're going to generate a lot of noise and you're going to miss threats. So you need to have the right tools to look at all those signals and find things kind of from a taking coverage of techniques and not only the artifacts, and also kind of with prioritization in a way, right, that kind of people will be able to handle, right, all the output from the tool. And finally, kind of, and closing kind of all these triangles around the content part, right? Kind of the tool may be very scalable. You may have very good analytics, but it's not looking for the right things. How we know that the tool is looking for the right things is what we call the content, right? So the rules, the machine learning models, the threat models, right? Using kind of some of the Securonics language here, all that type of content has to be built, tuned, and deployed on your solution, so you will find the threats that you're looking for. A lot of their work can be done by the vendor, but normally you have to have kind of an internal team to tune it, or to at least select the content that is most appropriate for your organization. And it's very likely that you need some help from a managed security service provider as well, that will do a lot of that content development and tuning on your behalf too.
Very interesting. I like those points which you raised about one, that end customers tend to deviate more to EDR because it's let's say low cost, easy skill type of a thing to do, but obviously in today's age it's getting increasingly less and less effective. And then this excellent triangle which you said about analytics, architecture, and content. I think it's all about the data, fine tuning to the right data in the right way. So once again, would like to invite all the online attendees to post their questions in the chat, and I think there's enough of discussion which has gone and would surely have generated some questions, whether it is the security threat landscape, whether it is best practices. And now, good to see you, Bala. I have a question here again on the best practices. With all these cyber attacks and all the methodologies which Augusto and Vasu has mentioned, from your point of view, from your learnings, your experiences, what sort of steps should CISOs and the security specialists take for their clients to keep them above the, let's say, the threat line, make sure that it's difficult to get in, and rapid detection whenever it does happen? Go ahead, Bala.
You put it so simple, Arun. Actually, that's the most challenging aspect for every CISOs in the world right now. And in spite of giving unlimited budgets and the kind of people and resources being provisioned to handle the cybersecurity threats, but still CISOs are facing the challenge. So in my opinion, whatever we have seen, whatever we have been consulting with our customers, whatever we've noticed is very broadly, I can say that is the context makes a lot of difference. When I say context, I'm taking points from our topic, for this session, and what points Ravi said, Vasu and Augusto has shared. So when you look at the topic is best practices for smart security operations, it's not just security operations. So when you say smart, so the smartness needs to be culled out, needs to be brought in, and this smartness is unique for your organization. That is one part of it. And again, building a cyber future is something which every organization is doing it, as Vasu rightly pointed out. Sorry. So when you want to talk about a resilient future, what does resilient translate into for your organization? That is something which needs to be brought out. So the context of the smart and the resiliency is what is to be decoded for every CISOs to understand that these are my threat landscape. What is that I'm getting exposed to? Where are my assets? Where are my people? So what are the kind of logs I'm getting? So there are too much of information flow. I mean, today when I see some certain SLAs which say that my response time is 1 hour, we used to joke around. I mean, 1 hour the entire organization can be compromised. I mean, 1 hour is too broad a time. So 1 hour is something which is out of the entire gamut. I mean, as Augusto rightly said, the speed at which somebody is going to hit you is where it's going to be tricky for every CISO, number one. And two, as Vasu rightly said, once we have to figure out as to how we have to survive that hit, and two, we can bounce back. So I think largely the context makes a lot of sense when we'll have to dwell more time on that aspect to keep our head above the water.
Okay, great. Very, very interesting over there. I mean, the way you have separated between smart security operations and the resilience into the organization. Just another take across Microland. Any best practices, any experiences which you would like to share about how you're managing it over there? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's no big secret. I mean, everybody is doing this, but when I say smart, is slightly different because, as Augusto rightly said, and Vasu also touched upon it. 70% of the attack, the signatures are known. There is also a statistic which says that only 30% of the vulnerabilities are being exploited, 70% never gets exploited. That is also another data point. So when you look at these things, what are we running away from? What are we trying to protect the organization from? So broadly, I would say you need three pillars, which is visibility, control and monitoring. So visibility is nothing but you need to have visibility over every single asset across the organization. When I say asset, it could be laptop, server, application, whatever it is. The asset has to be visible to you. The moment you know the asset, then you can define the control basis the importance of the asset as to how much of visibility and control you want to exercise there. Then comes the monitoring aspects wherein if something goes wrong, what do I do there? How do I know about it? Now, this part is something I know every organization is doing it at a basic level. Now, where is smart coming in is where, every organization can make a difference in the thinking. For example, um, can if an organization says that I will do any kind of changes in my active directory only on Thursdays between this time to this time. So what happens is you are creating a pattern. Now, any other pattern without this particular, which is going to deviate from this, becomes an anomalous traffic for you, and that creates a blip. So people have to focus upon asset, number one. Two, what is important, and in that, what we have to create is our own pattern to it. If you don't generate that pattern, then it is very difficult to even understand if somebody is going to misuse somebody's own credentials there. Say suppose Bala is using his credential and Bala's credentials compromised, the logs may not throw up some certain things because people think as only Bala is logging in. But actually, if you set a pattern that Bala is going to log in or make changes to Active Directory only on, say, on a particular day or a particular time, which has been already known to the stakeholders, then any deviation to that, it pops up. So that is where you build smartness into the system. So this is something which is very important. This is what we have been telling our customers also on this.
Understood. So basically, a regular pattern gets established, and then deviation from that is easier to pick out. As you said, sometimes easier said than done, because
Yeah.
these are cumbersome operations, and organizations tend to move their own way. So thank you for this great insights up to now from Vasu, Augusto, and Bala. But I'll just take a little break here, and we go to the third poll. So can we have the third poll, the last poll of this session? And the poll is now open for all the attendees. Welcome all of you to poll over here. It's basically about which security operations are not addressed in my organization. So go ahead and let's see the results. So the results now coming up. Can we put them on the screen, please? Can all of you see it? Vasu, Augusto, Ravi, and Bala. Okay, great, fantastic. So we have a skew over there. I think I'll just read it out. 11% events from endpoints. Just 1 second. Let me just read out the whole thing. 11% say that events from endpoints when employees are work from home. 56% ever growing surface attack, lack of visibility and control, and 33% number of alerts triggered are overwhelming. Number of alerts triggered are overwhelming. So thanks for the result polls. Great. So any comments on those results? I think Bala, something seems very suggestive over there. Let's start with you.
It's actually reflecting what the purpose of this entire discussion, Arun, here, because we wanted to help and we know the challenges. We have been talking to so many customers, and we are able to see certain challenges what they are putting across to us and discussing with us. So that's when, basic discussion with Ravi and Vasu and Augusto, we said, okay, let us do something which is going to reflect and is this real or not? We wanted to get that, and I'm very happy that the outcomes are in line with what we're discussing, and it is bang on. I mean, visibility, control, monitoring, what I said and what Augusto and Vasu also touched upon, it is something, it is not a one fix or one solution which is going to fix it. It is a strategy which needs to be worked out, and it is something which everybody needs help. And Vasu has got a great team out there. I think I would urge the customers to look into that and listen to us and then take a call on that.
Vasu, Augusto, any comments on that? I think this I was also quite taken aback. Number of alerts triggered are overwhelming as one of the things. But go ahead, Vasu and Augusto, any comments on those results?
I mean, I think it's to do with a lot of this traditional providers, the means of operating with legacy platform, right? See, the alert fatigue is across the board. We've seen large customers, small customers. Some of the, I think, needless to say, some customers look at from a lens of, how many, client that particular service provider has, right? So even if you take this analysis, the large service provider also being breached. I think it's all to do with when you're looking at a service ecosystem, it's the few pointers that I always call out as what is that underlying platform they're using to help you, your operations and your need. Right? That's a key point. I think that you need to look at from a technology. It's a really, really critical element along with the people and process from a service provider, right? And if you have right set tools and right mindset, I think we can actually address some of these challenges, what we're actually observing before. That's an important aspect. Don't go with, I may say in a cliche, it's not always better, right? So more importantly, if a service provider which is focused towards your goals, I think that's a key point around.
Great. Augusto, one question coming in, I can see from the attendees, if I can just direct this at you. You mentioned about this very interesting triangle of analytics, architecture, and contents. Question is that with advanced analytics, will we require less people to run security operations? I think quite interesting take over there. Go ahead.
Right. I was thinking if you compare kind of the two organizations, right? One of the more modern solutions with these analytics and one without, you will need less people. But one thing that we noticed kind of while speaking with organizations kind of at Gartner, right, that were adopting these tools is that what would usually happen is that they will not reduce the number of people. What they would do is actually kind of be able to cover things that they were not covering before, right? So I think kind of that the best outcome you can get from kind of using these solutions is not that you will pay less for your team, but your team will be more effective. So you'll be able to cover the things that you were not covering before, either kind of from your environment or that some types of threats that you were choosing to ignore because you were not able to handle them. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind, right? It may not be a way to save money, but it's definitely a way to achieve your objectives from a security perspective.
Great,
just to add, sorry, Arun.
Sorry, if I can just go ahead.
Sorry, just to add to what Augusto said, the key aspect here is, while there's a lot of flow of information here, the dashboards are going to make a lot of difference to the CISOs. And if the CISO knows what exactly they are supposed to monitor and what is critical to them, I think it throws up a different kind of world out there and a different challenge out there, which will help in turn for them to align the strategy and fortify the entire strategy there. That's something which I would just want to add to what Augusto said.
Interesting. And on this take, I see a question which is probably a continuation of what you're talking about. So the internal approach to the CISO, a question here is training sufficient to take care of this, or you still need qualified and specialized managed security service providers to help boost this? Bala, this is probably your area. Go ahead, please.
The answer is you need a mix of both the devils. I mean, you need to, because upscaling is something which is a never-ending story, right? So that's something which is always on the fly. And I would sincerely urge the organizations to even to look at the kind of technology stacks they are already invested in long back, right? I mean, somebody configured, something long back, and that still continues the same configuration, same things for next decade, and that is not the way it should be working. People need to look at what new technologies Nixon can actually offer to them on the table, and how they can consolidate things and make their lives more easy is something I would say that would be one of the priorities for the CISO also. So that is something which is very, very important.
Yeah.
And it's a continuous journey.
Interesting, very interesting. We're coming to the end of time, but I just want to go through one or two more short questions coming up. So Vasu, managed security service providers, a lot of things have been happening over there. Before there was cloud, it was fine to just work on a VPN, and the MSPs could manage, look at the enterprise and to look at that. But now with the cloud, and especially with the SOC as a service, how does the CIO actually identify what is suitable for them? Go ahead, Vasu.
I think, yeah, this is a very good question. And this is $1 million question for many CISOs, right? How do they really qualify a good service provider? 3 attributes, and I think I will call it here. One is definitely how good is the service provider in the technology ecosystem, right? What is the underlying platform that are actually running the service, right? If I go back to the resiliency model, one of the key attributes that I call is how quickly you can bounce back. Right? You want to have the service provider use this right technology to help you in terms of leveraging the analytics to beat, in terms of attackers, and be advanced in your detection so that you're able to quickly detect and remediate those threats, right? So the technology aspects of the service provider is very, very important. Unfortunately, we are seeing in the market still service provider using on-prem solution. They're no longer scalable. You will not have visibility. Your implementation is 2-year cycles. That's cannot be, the game, right? The second thing is also about, how transparent they are, right? So it's also about when, Bala mentioned dashboards. Many of the traditional MSS model is you send me the data, okay, I'll sit somewhere and I'll monitor it, and I'll only share certain reports, and that's the end of the story, right? That model, that's not going to be a transparent game. You want to give them access to what same data sets that your analyst actually looking at. So the transparency, proactiveness, engaging the customer in all forms of, SOC operation, that's a very important aspect. The third thing is also about, again, it goes back to the, every customer has invested in that, right? You need to have a provider to work with you in your ecosystem, rather than, every time they bring in their tools, and it's going to be a costly affair. So in a way, it's cost effectively comes from leveraging what you have and build your gaps, build solutions around your gaps, and help you to transform the journey, right? So that's, I would say, 3 attributes is very, very important from CISO lens. I would like to always sum up, go with an approach that what works for your organization is somebody who can really pay attention, somebody who can help you. A simple example that I quote, some of this service provider, right? When you configure the SIEM and SOC services, day 1, a firewall device sends log, that's all fine, it's perfect, you're in transition, you're live. Day 90, we have no idea why the devices stop sending a log, right? So it's a continuous process. The service provider has to be with you throughout the entire journey. It's just not that, okay, I sign up, I get the log, and it's none of my business. That model, it's really, really going to break, and you'll have a problem with the visibility.
A very, very interesting take over there, but we're going to be running short of time. But before we do that, I want to run through the key takeaways from all of you. So Bala, starting with you, key takeaways, some thoughts to work on for our attendees from your side. Go ahead, please.
I would try to keep it very short and possible. 3 points. One is visibility, control, monitoring. That's the first one. Number 2, focus on the kind of tool architecture, what you want to keep it, how they want to talk, and how you want to consolidate. Third one, focus on the dashboards. That is only which is going to keep your head above the water.
Interesting. I like the last one about the dashboards and keeping head above the water. Very interesting. Augusto, your key takeaways, recommendations for the attendees. Go ahead, please.
Right. Takeaways are probably 2, right? I think one, kind of the results of the last poll, I think are right on, right? Kind of the problem with coverage, right? And the problem with kind of overwhelming number of alerts. I think that's kind of 2 problems that affect everyone. So I think that's kind of key, really kind of key thing to keep in mind. And the other is, I think, from a more positive tone, right? Kind of I'm saying these attacks are detectable. There are multiple steps. They generate a lot of signals. So if you have the right tools, the right coverage, you'll be able to find them.
Fantastic. Very, very interesting. Vasu, your key takeaways, your recommendations. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. I think there are two things that I would call out is, I think good way to start in your program is start doing assessment, right? Assessment cannot be just one time. It's in a way looking at yourself from a mirror lens and how resilient you are from today's cyber threats, right? So make your assessment as a continuous process and you're building your resiliency. The second thing, again, I said it's a foundation, technology foundation that's supporting your operation. So, next generation SOC service, that is an equally important, that helps you to visibility, and also look at from a tool from a transformation lens, how these tools and ecosystem actually fitting to address and build your resiliency model. So those are two important aspects I think I would always recommend customers to focus on.
Thank you, Vasu. Very, very interesting. Absolutely brilliant session. Great takeaways. But before we close, Ravi, over to you. Whatever from your side, how would you like to summarize? Go ahead, please.
Okay, so thank you, Arun. So I've been interacting with multiple customers in Middle East, and what I have seen is there are two challenges in Middle East. First is from the skill side, that it's very difficult to find the right skill for your, SOC, or doing an assessment, or training or retraining your resources. And second is the cloud adoption. Because of the local compliances, most of the big organizations, they cannot go on cloud, and when they are not able to adopt to cloud-based solutions, there are many challenges, because when you adopt for a cloud-based solution, the responsibility of the service provider is there to safeguard your overall investment. With the on-prem environment, you are all alone. So these are the two challenges, and we as a vendor, we try to cover all these. Like just for example, like we provide CISO as a service, we provide assessments. There are customers who come to us and they ask like which SIM solution is good for us. So what we tell customers, that assessment is the first step, because nobody from outside can just tell you that this SIM on-prem or a cloud-based solution is good for you. It's a gradual process in which some assessment needs to be done, and based on that, you have to select a vendor and then go ahead and secure an environment. And it's a long-term strategy and a long-term relationship between the customer and the vendor. So this is from my side, based on the interaction with our customers and prospects in the region.
Thank you, Ravi. And would you like to say thank you to the attendees and vote of thanks from your side? Go ahead, Ravi, please.
Thank you, everyone, and really appreciate you spending 1 hour with us. And we have like short by 6 minutes, but I see all the attendees still with us. So hopefully this was a good session, and you will be contact details. You can reach out to any of the panelists for getting into a one-on-one discussion or any clarification. We will be more than happy to engage with you, and you will be receiving your Starbucks coffee voucher. So enjoy your coffee. Thank you.
Great, fantastic, Ravi. Great stuff over there. Fantastic sharing, knowledge sharing, and key takeaways from all the panelists over here. So on behalf of Global CIO Forum, Microland, and Securonics, Vasu, Augusto, Bala, and Ravi here, I thank all the attendees for sitting through the 60+ minutes of absolutely engaging content and discussion, and look forward to seeing you once again. Goodbye and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. Bye.